everyone, it's Nancy at Sitting and Painting Hampden. We're going to be painting this beautiful painting called Northern Lights 3, and it's called Northern Lights 3 because we've done a few different versions of Northern Lights. It's such a wonderful thing to paint, so yeah, we have a few different takes on it. I'm using a 16 by 20 canvas today. That's bigger than the canvas we sell in our kits, but it's important that I have a bigger canvas so that you can see what I'm doing. I also have a beverage. I actually have 2 beverages, depending on how it's going. Have a water jar with water in it. I'm using a couple of pieces of paper. I just have 2, but you only need 1 piece of paper. And like I said, that's going to help us texturize the top, make it easier. I'm using primary paints only. Mine are kind of runny. I made them a little watery already. I have red, yellow, blue, and then black and white. And then I have napkins and a few different brushes. Now in our YouTube classes, and oh, by the way, so I'm going to be recording this for YouTube. So if you have any personal comments during it, don't worry, I always edit those out before I post it on YouTube. And I have about 90 different classes on YouTube. So we put those up there because it's just been a very unusual winter, and it's kind of, we're just hoping people hang on and wait for us to reopen and have fun on YouTube too. But the great thing about being live is that I can go back and forth between the easel setup and the computer. And if you have questions, I can look at your work and give you feedback on the computer. Or also, if you have questions, you can ask in chat. But just keep in mind, while I'm teaching, I'm not reading chat, but on the breaks, I will. So I have a large flat brush, I have a medium flat brush, and I have a small round. But what I mean by flat or round is just the flat is crimped, so one side is wide, the other side is thin. That's what makes it a flat brush. And then the round brush, the metal just feels round all the way around. Okay, so those are the supplies I'm using. Make sure you have, a cup of water at least. I'm going to be putting my biggest brush in water. And I would put, if you're drinking wine, put it far, or any beverage, put it far from your paint, because you don't want to drink that. It's not good. I put my biggest brush in water, and I'm just covering my canvas with just plain old water. And the reason I'm doing that is it's really dry in Denver, and we want to make sure that our canvas is hydrated enough that our paint moves around easily. And so if you lived in a wetter place than Denver, you might not need to do this. Paint doesn't dry as fast in Miami or, more humid places. But here in Denver, where it's cold and the heater's running all winter, it gets really dry. So a little water is going to help make things move really nicely. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just so long as there's water more or less all over the canvas. Nice. All right, so the way we're going to paint this painting is we're going to start with the background, and then we'll do the mountains, and then we'll do the trees. And so we're going to start at the bottom of the sky because it's the easiest. So I'm just going to pick up my biggest brush, and I'm going to go right into yellow paint. I'm putting yellow paint on both sides, and I'm going to put that yellow paint down here. This is going to be the setting sun behind our mountains. And yellow is one of those colors that doesn't stick really, really well to the canvas because it's more of a transparent color than a translucent. So if you add a little bit of white to your yellow, just a little bit, just kind of stir it in, it's going to give your yellow a little more body and it will provide better coverage. So we don't really have to go all the way down. You can if you want to, but that bottom area is going to be covered by mountains. This is the sun behind the mountains. And only a little bit of it's going to be peeking out anyway. But then I'm also going to paint the sides next to it. And then I'm going to take my canvas off, pick it up, and paint the bottom. The reason I'm painting the bottom is that's called a gallery wrap. And when you paint all over the canvas, it looks like your painting was on a piece of canvas and then they put it on a frame, right, on the structure of the canvas. And it just looks more finished if it's painted all the way around. If you don't do that, then it looks better in a frame, and this will save you money. All right, so like I said, I'm going to give you a couple of, we're going to go ahead and do another step before I give you time to visit. We want to make sure everybody has time to visit. I didn't pick up any more yellow. I just have a dirty brush, and I'm just adding a little bit more with just my dirty brush. I didn't pick up any more. I'm just using it where I stopped before and just using the dirty brush to make a little bit above where I stopped before, because why not? And then I'm going to clean my brush really well. I always use a lot of water and really clean hard on my brush, because if I let the water do all the work, then I don't have to use a lot of napkins. And I'm very concerned about conservation, not using too many trees when I paint. So if I use the water a lot, then I don't have to do a lot of dabbing on my napkin. In fact, the bristles are clean. Cool. All right. So we're going to actually do 2 steps before I give you time, okay? I'm going to go ahead and tell you the next step, but I know you're not there yet, and that's fine. I just want to be able to give you 2 steps at a time between letting you have your time to do it. The rest of the canvas, I'm just going to cover up here until the very beginning of where that yellow starts. I'm going to cover it in just plain old blue. That's going to be our basis for the sky. We're going to do a lot to the sky, but this is just putting on the base coat. And I'm going to put that all over the back, the top, but I'm going to avoid getting it in the yellow because I don't really want a green sky. You can go right up to it and maybe touch it just a little bit, but I don't want it to mix a lot with the yellow. It can a tiny bit. We don't want to leave a white band. We do want to have it touch, but mostly we want to keep them separate. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm also going to paint the top of my canvas just like I did the bottom, but this time with blue. All right, so the top is blue. The top 2/3 is blue. The bottom third is yellow. So 2/3 blue, 1/3 yellow. This yellow is a little high. I could take it a little lower. So you could always take it a little bit lower. That's where my dirty brush was, right? And the blue is more powerful than the yellow. So I'm not getting green. So make sure it's only 1/3 yellow, okay?
Well, no, you're not
Hey, Nancy,
to.
we have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
We may have taken our yellow up a little too high.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, we may have taken the yellow up a tad too high.
Okay.
Would you recommend we kind of just leave it that way and it'll get fixed throughout the painting, or is there anything we should do now?
Great question. So it's your call, it's your choice. If you leave it, you'll have more sunset behind your mountains. If you want to make it lower, then just let it dry and then paint white over the part that you don't want. And then paint blue over that. But and you can always fix things when they're with acrylic paint. But if like my yellow right here is dry, I can see that it's not shiny. So I can put white paint over any dry paint of any other color and then let it set and dry. Just like you would correction fluid if you were writing a letter. I know nobody uses letters anymore, right? But uses mail. But everyone is familiar with correction fluid, hopefully.
Like whiteout.
Yeah.
So if you put the white over what you don't want, let it dry, and then you can come back in later and paint blue over it.
Excellent. Thank you, Nancy.
You're very welcome. But do let it dry in between, okay? That was a great question. Thank you. I was going to tell you that anyway, so that was a perfect question. 10,000 imaginary points for you. I have no idea what the points get used for, but you get 10,000 of them.
We'll take them early on because I think our painting may get a slight bit worse, Nancy.
Yeah, you might want to save those points, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to try to build them up at the beginning. You may take them away when you look at our paintings later.
Well, so it is supposed to be all blue.
That's the way I bowl. I always get 2 strikes in the beginning and gutter balls the rest of the game.
Me too. It's fine. What can you do?
What can you do?
Okay, if we don't have the white, do we need the white in the middle, like the white bar?
Thank you. No, I was just using that as an example, but now I have to let it dry before I paint it back.
Okay.
Or I can bring mine down lower too.
We're not muted.
That's what I said. Yeah,
Okay. I'm just gonna straight up bring my blue down.
well, I'm just gonna say if we were supposed to draw
If your paint starts to stick a little bit or just feels like it's not moving as easily as it did in the beginning, just pick up a drop or 2 of water, knock it off so it doesn't streak. And then if you paint with a drop or 2 of water, it'll help you smooth out areas that are just too dry. Just take it easy. You don't want big drips. And my white down here is actually mixing a little with the blue, and you know, that wasn't really part of the plan. It's a happy accident, but I'm kind of liking it, so I'm not worried about it. So this is a good time to tell you that everyone's painting is going to look different. And the great thing about painting nature, like skies and trees, is that nature changes constantly. Skies change about every 5 minutes, trees grow. If you took a picture, you went to Estes Park and you took a picture from a spot one day, and then you came back the next year, the same day, the picture would look a little different. The trees are higher, or you know, the seasons may have started changing or not changing. The sunset or the sky is going to be totally different. So just know your painting is going to look different, but because it's a landscape, it's still gonna look like a landscape and it's still gonna be cool. Okay, so I took 2 drops of water and 2 drops, literally like the size of 2 ladybugs of red paint. And I mixed them together on my palette. So this is almost like dirty water. It's so thin. Just the tiniest amount of red paint, teeny tiny. And then the same amount of water. And I'm just gonna use that. It's just red, no white in it, just red mixed with a little water and a slight amount. I didn't mix water into all my red, but it's just very watered down red, just a tiny bit. And I'm just gonna use that over this bottom area of the blue and just try to make it so that the yellow base is a little messed up. I don't want it to be a straight line. In fact, there was a little bit of blue there, white there, I forgot. And that's just kind of all mixing in. Basically what I'm doing is yellow and blue both mix really nicely with watered down red. The blue becomes a purple and the yellow becomes an orange. And by just going over that area and messing it up a bit, it already created a nice sunset. Blue and yellow together make green, and that's not great. That's why we try not to really overlap them. But yellow and red look great together in a sky because it makes orange, and blue and red together make purple, and that looks great in a sky, and they can be next to each other, and it looks good. So it's a couple of drops of water with 2 ladybugs of red, if you haven't done that already. That's all it is. It's so thin. It's so thin. It's like skim milk or thinner even. It's just really, really thin. And that super watered down red paint just kind of messing up that border. And then I go, notice I'm doing like crisscross strokes. It's overlapping between the blue and the yellow. And it's making a nice sunset because it's bringing the blue down and the yellow up, and they're both mixing with the red and making a beautiful sunset. Wasn't that easy? But it has to be super watered down to really get that nice sunsetty effect. Sunsetty, that's a word I just made up. And if it gives you harsh lines and you don't like them, you can always paint with another drop of water and just, that helps you blend a little bit. Super easy way to make a sunset. Yellow on the bottom, blue on the top, blend with watered down red that overlaps both, and you have a beautiful sunset. That is the easiest way I know to make a sunset. Normally when I'm painting sunsets, I would, go in and put multicolored clouds, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do this Aurora Borealis effect, which is also really cool. So if you don't already have a piece of paper or a piece of junk mail that's made out of paper, this would be the time to get that. Or another thing you could use is if you have a, piece of sea sponge, like the really holy, like natural sea sponge that has a lot of texture on it, you could use a piece of that. Basically what we need is just something to texturize the sky with. So any of those things would work. And again, one per person. Napkins will not work for this next thing because napkins absorb the paint and paper doesn't absorb it quite as much. So either a piece of paper or foil, something that doesn't, junk mail, something that isn't going to absorb the paint. That's what we need. But napkins, you don't get any paint left. It just sticks to the napkin. So. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, I cut my paper in half just because why not? That way I have two. So I have a second one. I'm going to go ahead and crumple this up. And I didn't fold it because I need all these surfaces on it. The more surfaces you have on it, the better. And if you might remember about 20 years ago, it was really popular to paint bathrooms this way, like sponge painting. And so, yeah, just crumpled up something. And I'm gonna go through the steps that I see the paint in this painting, but just know, in general, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference if you're not in the same order I am. But I'm gonna go walk through the steps that I see in this painting for how they applied that texture. It looks to me like the first thing this artist did, and actually the original painting was one that I did years ago, and this is a copy of it. So I don't even know what happened to the original, but anyway, I dipped my wadded up paper in white. Now, if your white is really thick like toothpaste or peanut butter, you're gonna need to thin it with water. I always thin my paints with a little bit of water. I want them the consistency of pancake syrup, not peanut butter. So if yours is like peanut butter, stir a little water in. You can just do that one color at a time. And then I'm going to dip that wadded up paper in so that I have lots of surfaces there. And then I'm going to start in this area and I'm just going to tap on some. I know, you're probably thinking, over my beautiful sunset, I'm going to tap on some colors. Make sure, oh, by the way, always make sure your brushes are clean. Clean them after each use so you don't pick up a brush and have an unhappy surprise, right? Always clean your brushes and then dry them and lay them down. So I have this textured area. Then I'm gonna, now your fingers are gonna get messy, sorry. Then I'm going to turn it a little bit and I wanna just go over it again. Now, if you don't wanna do that, you can use your biggest brush to just kind of tap down or brush away the big parts. But I'm basically right now just trying to mess up that white paint by tapping over it a bunch. I don't want any big clumps. I want it to look like a storm of stars already. And I didn't tap back into my white. I didn't. I'm just messing up what I already have by tapping over it a lot. I know, this looks crazy, but you're going to have to trust me. That's just kind of breaking up that sunsetty area. What mine is already dry. I can already do this. That's how little paint I used. And then you could take a little bit of that white paint and you could just real softly put in a few in the background and do the same thing. Just, it was the tiniest amount of paint, a little bit of paint in this focal point area, the center area, and then just tap over it. Don't pick up more paint. Just kind of tap over it. And we're putting in really nice, we're going to be putting in these rows of stars too later. So don't worry, we're not doing that yet. But I'm just building up layers of starry, colorful reflections. And the first layer is white. And try to move your wadded up paper in different directions so you get different kinds of spots. If you overdid it and it's too white, no problem. You can always fix anything that you do by putting more blue on and covering up whatever you think is too much with a little blue like that. No problem. They mix and they're dancing around together, the blue and the white. They're having a good old time. You can see how a sea sponge would do the same thing, as long as you move it around so that you don't get the exact same kinds of spots everywhere. And I'm putting more of these in the focal point of the painting, like this area. But you can also put a little bit, you know, on the sides and the top. I just don't want to, I want to keep most of the attention in this area. I forgot to warn you when you signed up for this class, you're going to get paint on your fingers. I just use a little bit of paint at a time though. I'm not using tons of it. I just dip in a little bit. It's not huge amounts of paint. And sometimes I have to, if I had a death grip on it, sometimes I have to open it back up so that it's a little less compact. I think the biggest tip I have for you is don't put on too much paint. Because what happens is if you're putting on a lot of paint, they're all going to mix together and you'll have a brown sky, and that would be really sad. So just remember, just a little bit of paint. That's why I thinned mine.
This
Hey,
other white one
Nancy.
is very sweet.
I put a little bit too much paint on early on, so I have to wait a second for it to dry before I can do the white. So just letting you know.
No worries, no worries. No worries. When you put on the white, just go really easy. Make sure your paint's nice and thin too. My paint is I mixed it with a little water, so it's like pancake syrup. That's what's on my plate. That's why it's running all over. You can tell it's kind of running all over now. When we give it to you in the kit, it's, you know, it's usually like Greek yogurt. We want a little thinner than that. It's just thicker paint takes longer to dry. If you like how that blue on top of the white looks, or white on top of the blue looks, and you want, you can mix up a little bit of light blue. I just mixed a teeny tiny amount, very little. And then I could dip my, whatever this thing is called, paper wad, into a little bit. And I could also do a little bit of that here and there. It just creates one more layer, but it's the colors we've already used. They're just mixed differently. And I'll show you what this is hopefully going to look like when we're done. You can see the blue back there. There's the dark blue from the sky, and then there's some light blue. And we're going to do all these colors one step at a time. And we're even going to do black last. But those, there's more than one way to paint this painting. There are more advanced brushes you can use, but I think this is the easiest way. And it works. I always like simple. That's why in our YouTube classes, we like to stick to a really basic color palette and then mix our colors ourselves. Use brushes basic brushes. Anything you don't like up here in the sky, just cover it up with blue. Anything you don't like down here, cover it up with white and then let it dry and then paint over it. But just know that this painting is going to go through an awkward teenager stage. And I say that as an experienced parent, that all paintings have an awkward teenager stage. And we're not really sure what they're going to turn out like until they're older, right? So until we put on the mountains, this whole background is going to look really funny to us. But then we'll put the mountains on and it'll bring it all together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you the next color for those who are ready. And I understand some of you are waiting for your yellow and your blue still to dry, and that's okay. I'm going to repeat things, so don't worry. Don't worry, be happy, okay? I'm going to re-wad that paper, or you can get another piece, whatever's easier for you. And like I said, aluminum foil can work too, whatever you have laying around. And then, so I dipped it in a little bit of thin red. And now I'm going to put in a little bit of thin red. This painting has it here and it has it here and a little bit there. So it doesn't really matter where you put it exactly. But in this general area, and then again, don't put it on thick, okay? I put a little too much on down here, but no problem. I'm going to let it dry on my paper a few minutes, and then I'll go back over it with a little blue and cover up a little bit of that. Because it doesn't, I can go back and forth, and in this painting, you do need to go back and forth a bit. So if you're just catching up, after you had the blue and the yellow, then I went over this with a medium brush and a little bit of very, very watered down red, right? To put in this kind of golden glow over the sunset. And then I used my crumpled paper and I put on white. Oops. I picked up a little black instead of blue. Oh well. Here's the thing about this painting. No one's ever going to see the original except you. Your friends are going to come in and they're going to see what you did. And even though it won't look exactly like the original, they're going to think you're a genius. I accidentally picked up black instead of blue. But even then, I don't care. It'll be fine. So after I got that thin red on the sunset, then I did the crumple up paper, I did white. And then I did a little light blue, which was blue mixed with white, and then red. So the idea behind this painting is that northern lights are basically a whole bunch of stars in the galaxy, right? And all of the, I'm not quite sure where the colors come from, but it's all reflected light in a storm of stars. And the stars reflect all these colors. And anything you don't like, put blue on it and just cover it up. All right, I'm going to keep it moving, even though you might not be caught up, don't worry. But I want to keep it moving so you don't overdo your sky and make it look like Disney World exploded. So I'm going to take my medium brush, it's clean. See this little blue and a little red? And I'm mixing that together to make purple. I don't have much blue left. I used a lot of blue when I put on the background, but I just need a little. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white and swirl that in too. That way my purple will show up because it was looking too dark. Blue is a really powerful color. And I add a little bit of red, a little bit of white, and now the purple will actually show up and look like purple. If you add more blue, it'll be a different shade of purple than if you add more red. It's really up to you, but you definitely need a little bit of white so that you can see it. So I'm dipping in my thing, and I'm going to add the purple in the same kind of diagonal, starting to make my diagonals. Do you see that? The red was kind of sort of in a diagonal, and now the purple is. But if you didn't do the red in a diagonal, it doesn't matter because it wasn't a lot of diagonal. You can put a little purple there too. And if you want to do another diagonal with just a little bit of purple, go for it. We're just doing it in this general diagonal shape. So we're starting to suggest lines of colors, but we're not overly concerned about it yet. So if your painting's looking like a colorful mess, you're doing great. But what we want to do is always put it on thinly, just a little bit of paint, because if we have a lot of paint, then all the colors will mix together. If it's thin, then thin like pancake syrup, then it dries quick. All right, so far it's just looking like a mess, but trust me, it'll start getting better soon, I promise. And if the mess is really bothering you, just grab some more junk mail and you could throw it away each time. Depends on how much paper you have laying around. So of the crumpled up colors, we had white, we had light blue, we had red, and we had purple. And each one was separate. And I'm going to give you time to catch up, okay? And then we're going to just do two more, and then we'll do our mountains. But I'll give you time to let this dry a few minutes and then catch up. And then just one more reminder, try to suggest a slant. So the purple, I went clump, clump, clump in a slant. The red, I went clump, clump, clump in a slant. The purple, clump, clump, clump in a slant. I put my wadded up paper in white. And I'm going over that red moving my arm around. And my red was still a little bit wet, and that's fine because it's mixing a bit, and that's cool. And that's creating this streak of these northern lights. And I'm gonna rotate my hand a bit so I get lots of different shapes in my thing. And I'm gonna do that over my purple as well. I've got 3 more or less angled areas. You might have 2, you might have 4, whatever amount, whatever ones you put in yours, that's fine. I need to start this one a little bit lower. I want it to start in this. So it just looks like it's all one continuous band of lights. And again, this painting isn't going to make sense until we finish the sky and then we start putting on our mountains and we'll go, ah, I see it. And one more time over this purple. And since my purple was still a little bit wet and my white was still a little bit, or my red was still a little bit wet, when I put this white on and then twist and turn my hand and go over it a few times, that purple is showing up as it's kind of mixing with the paint. Notice I'm not scrubbing it. I'm not scrubbing it because if I scrubbed it, I would scrub out the colors and just make a mess. I want this texture, this picking it up, taking it off, picking it up, taking it off. I don't know if there's an art word for what we're doing. There might be an art technique word for this. I have no idea what it would be called. I know if you tap with a brush like this, it's called stippling. And I don't know if it's called that when you use a wadded up piece of paper. I'm not sure. I'll have to check with some experts. But it's picking it up, taking it off, picking it up, taking it off. It is stippling in a way. All right, so now we have those white northern lights. I could even do a little bit over here since I have a little extra sky. Up to you. If I want to make another little diagonal over here, I could. Because there was room. But I'm repeating that same diagonal. That's the point. So this is not a to-do step, but I just want to tell you, when we're in the studio, we have a lot of different kinds of brushes, and we would probably do this with what's called a chip brush. You get those at the hardware store, and they're just kind of like rugged 1.5 inch brushes that I don't know, they're just rugged and made out of hog hair or something. But anyway, so that's one way to do it. Or we also sometimes use a fan brush and just use the corner. So there's lots of different ways to make this technique. I like the paper way because you get a different corner or crevice every time. But sponges also work. See, sponges also work. All right, so we're getting close to finishing the sky, I promise. After the white, there's one more step to the sky. I'll just show you that because it's a two-stepper and I give you time. The last step is I take a crumple. You could use the same crumple you used before, it doesn't matter. Or a fresh one, whatever. And the last crumple is going to be up here. And I'm going to go kind of between those white stripes. And I'm just going to add some darkness to the sky up near the top of the canvas. And I could do it on the sides too. By adding a little black in there, it's just adding more contrast in the in-between dark areas that are already a little darker. Not over the white, but in those in-between areas, just adding a little contrast near the top to make that sky look a little darker near the top. But don't overdo it. You don't want to cover all your pretty colors. It's just adding a little more night sky up there. I'm mostly going in between these white stripes and mostly at the top. And if I overlap a little of my white, it doesn't matter. But it's mostly just trying to darken up the corners and the top so that that white really gets our attention. And again, my paint is thin. And I'm really emphasizing the tops and the side. Because at night, the sky would be darker up above, right? That's the idea. This painting, like I said, is really all about the sky. I have a little bit too much here, right? So all you have to do is let it dry. And then if you want to put a little more, you know, white over it or purple mixed with white, you can do that over the black, but let it dry first. You can always undo things with acrylic paint. That's why I love acrylic paint. If you were doing this with oil paints, it would be really hard not to make a big mess because there's so many steps and layers. And you definitely could not do this with watercolor. You would have to put, you can't layer colors in watercolor, not very well. So, but as long as you let paint dry, you can always add layers in acrylic paint. That's what I love about it. All right, now this one's starting to look a lot more like that one. I hope you agree. And then it's really going to come together when we get our mountains and our trees on there. Now, while you're painting, some options for you in general. If you have any glitter at your house, This, when it's still wet, this would be a good time to sprinkle. Pick up your painting, sprinkle a little glitter on, let that dry. Once it's dry, you can't do that, right? Unless you put it on with glue or something. In our studio, we have a glitter glue. And so we do that as a last step. Now, we don't put that in our kits because most paintings don't require it, or even, it wouldn't even look good on them. But if you have glitter at home and you want to add a little glitter to it, do it while the paint's still wet. They also have that glitter glue. I noticed, I was really shocked. They had a little bottle of it in the dollar store. And you can always let the painting dry. And then if you happen to be in the dollar store and pick up a tube of that, you can put that over the white. That's kind of cool. But not necessary, but it's cool on this painting. An optional thing. So I'm going to give you time to catch up on that. The bottom line is I put that crumpled up paper with the black on it in the areas that were already a little dark. Now you can see if I were doing this with a brush, I could never get all these little speckles. But with that crumpled up paper and get those little speckles and put in that texture, great. So if any of this is too, this isn't the last step, this is just kind of another comment. But if any of this is like too bold and it's driving you crazy, remember, you can always pick up your wad of paper. I actually don't have one anymore. And you can always touch over it with the colors that you do want to break up anything that's just too much for you. But I would recommend before you do that, step away about 5 feet and look at it from a distance, because you don't want to do something unless you know for a fact that it doesn't look good from 5 feet. Really, the most important thing is that it looks good from 5 to 10 feet away. Up close, our paintings almost never look good. And if you've ever been to a museum and to see impressionistic works like Van Gogh or Monet, if you do see those up close, they look terrible from this close, absolutely terrible. But then when you back away about 5 to 10 feet, they look amazing. So just keep that in mind. It's not supposed to look good this close, the way we are looking at it when we are painting it. The only way we really know what it looks like is to step back at a proper viewing distance. If you went to a museum and you put your nose in the painting this close, the guard would get very nervous and tell you to step back, and maybe not even so nicely. That's why you have to step back 5 or 10 feet and really see it the way it was meant to be appreciated. All right, so I just want to show you, this is an easy step. I'm going to take the stick end of my small brush, just the stick, and I'm going to pop it in white paint. Just that easy. Pop. And then I'm going to put stars over the black areas or dark blue areas. I know, as if this painting didn't have enough bling, right? But just adding some stars over that black makes those other stars really pop. Super easy step, but make sure it's random. You don't want it to look like a dots game. Don't make it too orderly. Some big, some small. If you tap more than once, you know, you can probably tap with the same amount of paint on your brush, you know, 5 times without reloading. I'm just tapping little circles on the dark areas. And don't forget the top and the sides of your painting too. My dark areas are between my white stripes. And I can take them all the way down. Why not? We have taught this painting in many different ways, and I have to tell you, there's no easy way. It's a lot of steps, but it's also the one that when we hang it on the walls, people go, wow, that's pretty. I want to paint that. And you can put as many or as few as you want. I tend to go overboard with everything. I came from a family of 9 kids, and somewhere in the deep, dark crevices of my mind, someone taught me more is better. And my staff is constantly telling me, Nancy, less is more. But you do you. And that is finally a finished sky. Woohoo! This one is more subtle. Believe it or not, I think in the original, we probably went back and forth between the colors more often. But same general idea. Be sure to get up and look at your painting from 5 to 10 feet away, okay? If you haven't already done that. I want to show you one more thing you can do, which is completely optional. Hold on, I'm just plugging my phone back in. I must have knocked out the cord. There we go. Okay, so the thing that's totally optional is you can pick up your small brush and you can make little stars in the dark sky, the darker parts. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to chisel it on the side of the plate like that to load paint on my brush. I want a nice thin point. So the smallest brush, or if your smallest brush isn't small enough, chisel it like that and try to get a fine point. And then there's little stars that are just basically plus signs. I start in the middle from a star, and then I flick up, I flick out, flick out, flick down. And that just adds little sparkly stars wherever you want them. But by starting in the center and flicking up and down, flicking up, flicking down, flipping to each side, it makes it so the ends are pointy, so it looks more like a flicker. And if you want, just for fun, you can always make it more like an asterisk with little ones in between, but that's not necessary. Totally up to you. Just another kind of star. It's like a flickering star. I think it's hilarious that we also put glitter on some of these starry sky paintings because they're already over the top, but that's what makes them fun. All right, the mountains and the trees are going to be a piece of cake compared to the sky. Well, I would call this sky an advanced sky, and I would call mountains super easy and trees medium. So you guys are doing great. You hung in there. You're all still here. Woohoo! I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step. And I do understand that you might not be caught up. The next step is an easy one. So just keep your ears open, okay? Well, I think it's easy. So I have white and black on my palette. I'm going to pick up my medium brush and I'm going to mix together a little white, a little black. I don't need a lot. I'm not mixing all of my white and all of my black, just a little bit of each. When I mix my paints, I always do a little at a time because I don't want to waste all my paint and then need more of it later, not have it. So I always take my time, mix a little at a time. Then if I need more, mix some more. But I've got some gray. It's not as dark as charcoal. It's just kind of a medium gray. Not real light, not real dark. And what I want you to see in these mountains is that this mountain is big. And then this one's medium, this one's small, and this one's baby. The general idea is that each mountain is different. You could even make one a double peak if you wanted. The important thing is that each one's a little different than the next. We don't want it to be like Charlie Brown's shirt or a line of teepees that are exactly the same size. And notice this one has one really long slope and this is steeper. And then this valley, pretty much triangular, but then this one's a lot smaller and one arm of it's longer. Just make sure that you have variety in your mountains and between them. So you can always make your mountains bigger, but it's real hard to make them smaller. So I'm going to start small, knowing that I can always make them bigger if I really want to. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to paint one down here, and I'm just doing it with my gray paint. And remember, you're going to be painting over that sunset. So keep that in mind too. If you love your sunset, you might want to not have them too big. So there's one, and then this one's going to be, this is my big one. It's going to be a lot taller. If you really hate an area on your painting, keep that in mind. Maybe you want to cover it. I don't want to make them too steep, so I'm only going to put in 4. You could also put in 3. I would not recommend more than that, or else they're just going to be too steep. And I'm also making it bumpy and messy. I don't want it to be too perfect. There's another one. That one's fat. This is thinner, this is fatter. This is thinner and taller, this is fatter and shorter. And that's what I want. But I still have some sunset behind it. Yeah. And I don't have to fill it in perfectly either. I can let some of that yellow just come through. I'm just going to scribble in this gray. And if there's yellow behind it, cool, that just looks like reflected light. Another guy over here. Guy, gal, whatever. Non-gender binary, whatever. Whatever floats your boat. And then you can pick up your painting and paint those on the underside if you want. Totally up to you. I'm definitely going to carry it over to the sides though. But notice how each one's a little different. Maybe this one's going to be double. Yeah, why not? Because every mountain needs a friend, right? You do you. You do what you, maybe you know a mountain range. Maybe you're going to look at a picture. I don't know. Just do whatever feels good to you. But I do want to make sure that I don't cover too much of that yellow background because that sunset looks cool, I think. This was just in gray, white mixed with black. Don't use all your black for it though, okay? Because we're going to need black for the trees. Now it's starting to come together, isn't it? Once again, I just want to remind you, try not to make your mountains too steep. If they're really steep, they just don't look quite as realistic. So sometimes I go back in, if I think mine, if I walk away 5 feet, then I go, oh, that was too steep. I might come back in and make it a little less steep. But you know, your mountains may be Colorado, or they might be Arizona, they might be Norway. You just have no idea, right? So you do them the way you like them. All right, I'm going to show you how I'm going to highlight and shadow these mountains, okay? So my paint is still a little bit wet, and that's absolutely fine. I'm going to take my tiny brush and dip it in a little bit in the black paint, and I'm going to decide which side of my mountain is the light side and which side is the dark side. But I have to choose one. You'll notice in this painting, on the right of each mountain, it's brighter and whiter. See that on the right of that one, on the right of that one, on the right of that one, all of them. And then on the left side, it's darker. And what that shows me is there's more light shining from over there. So you have to decide, and it doesn't matter to me which side you pick, but wherever the light side is, you have to keep that the light side on each mountain. So just for making it easy, I'm going to do what they did in this one. And on the left side, I'm going to make that my dark side. I'm going to take that tiny brush, a little black paint on it, and I'm going to start in the peak, and then I'm going to make a zigzaggedy line. It's anything but straight. It's not straight. A Harry Potter scar, a bolt of lightning, whatever you want to call it. That one, that mountain is behind that one in my world. So I'm going to just show part of it. This one, same thing. I'm going to make a Harry Potter line or a lightning strike, whatever that means to you. Divide it. You're basically dividing, you're creating the continental divide. I think that's technically right. I don't know. If we have any scientists out there, let me know. All right, so just make it so curvy, and you can kind of go off to one side. That works. So on whatever's going to be my dark side, I'm going to mix a tiny bit more black in with that gray I already had. Or make a new gray that's darker than what you already had, but still gray, more like charcoal instead of black. I don't want to go too dark on these. And then I'm just going to scribble in, scribble, 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 scribble. Notice how I'm kind of flicking my brush back and forth like that. Scribble, 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 scribble. But not filling it in perfectly, just to scribble on the dark side of each mountain. Oops. So scribble, 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 scribble. Really messy and loose. You can go right up to that line, kind of mess up that line a bit so it isn't real obvious that you made a line. All right. So I told you that I was going to show you 2 ways to make highlights and shadows on the mountains. That's one way. This way is just kind of silly fun. I'm going to take a business card. You don't have to do it this way, but it's just kind of fun. I'm going to dip it, just the edge of it, in my black paint. See that? And then with that business card, I don't have to stay exactly to that line. I can just pull it down. And that also creates a dark side. I should have done it my gray, not my black. Oops, but you get the general idea that business cards can work like a palette knife. And I should have, like I said, I should have done that in gray, not black. But the fun part is you can always go over it with a little white too. Let those colors mix. But business cards are kind of fun in general because they work just like palette knives. So whichever way you like, business cards or a brush, you decide, as long as you get one side a little darker than the other, okay? You can tear your business side card too, so it's not so wide. But see that? That's made with a brush, that's made with a business card. You decide. In the studio, that would be a palette knife. And if you don't like it, use your gray paint over the whole thing, let it dry, do it again. You can switch techniques. Why not? You're painting. But this is all on the dark side. And because you guys are my extra smart advanced class, I suspect you can figure out how we're going to paint the light side. Same thing. Oh, there's a doggy outside. Little scratchy scribbles on the light side with white. I'm not making it solid though, because I don't want it to be solid. I want some of that dark to show through as I'm scribbling it on. And if you want to try that with your business card, you can do that too. Or you can just use a small brush and just scribble on your bright side and let some of that gray shine through. Don't paint it with a huge brush and make it solid. Just scratch it on thinly so you keep those mountain slopes and crevices. It gives it texture. See that? Texture is really good in a mountain. Kind of flicking my brush, scribbling it on. Not a lot of paint, thin paint, just a little bit. Letting that gray just peek its way through. I like to refer to this as scratching. I have no idea what the real art word would be, but in my world, it's called scratching. Just putting it on really lightly and thinly. Not much paint. So we have a bright side and we have a dark side on each one. And even on my double peak, I have the same thing. Woohoo! I'm gonna give you some time to catch up on that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you the trees, and I know you might still be working on your mountains, but I want to respect our timeline. So I'm going to show you the trees, and just know if you're not going as quickly, that's fine. This is a hard painting, and I'll be here as long as you need me. But I'm going to show you the painting in case anybody does have a night shift tonight. I know it's Friday night. Most people don't have to work, but you never know. One of you might be a nurse or work a night shift. So I'm going to show you the trees. That's our last step before signing our name. So I'm going to take my medium flat brush. It has to be a flat brush. And then I did dip it in water. It needs to always have a little moisture in the brush. All right. And I'm loading both sides of my flat brush with black paint, and then I'm knocking off any clumps. I want it to have plenty of paint on it, but no giant clumps. Okay, so even if you're still working on your mountains, take a look up here so you can see how I do it, okay? I'm going to, again, yeah, you guys should be able to hear me. All right, so I'm going to start on the sides. These two trees are taller. So I'm going to start about here, and I'm going to tap on a trunk. See how I'm tapping it? I'm not pulling down because this way I can't get a straight line. I don't want a straight line. Nothing in nature is a perfectly straight line. So that helps me remember that. All right. So I have, and you can load your brush, tap off any clumps. I'm going to drop down, this is really important, drop down a ½ inch. And then let that skinny point be at the top of your tree all by itself. That's where little branches haven't grown yet. The trunk is still growing. And then I'm going to drop down a ½ inch, and then I'm going to tap on with the flat part of my flat brush. See that? Holding it flat. I'm going to tap on these branches on my tree. I'm dropping down with each row of branches, many taps on each side, many taps. As I go down, it's getting wider. More taps on each side as I go down. More taps. And I'm just alternating sides, but notice how my brush is still flat. It's still on the flat side. I'm still holding it flat. I'm not angling it like this or angling it like that. I'm holding it flat, but I'm letting my arm, my hand just drop down, my whole arm just drop down. And then I'm making sure to make each row of branches stick out farther as they go down because I want that triangular Christmas tree shape. Now, when I look at that, I want to make sure that I can't see the trunk because there are branches that grow out that way, there are branches that grow out that way, there are branches that grow to the back, branches that grow to the front, right? So in order to paint the ones that grow to the front and the back, so my tree doesn't look too skimpy, like a Charlie Brown tree, is I need to tap over just the middle area, only the middle, not the ends of the branches, just this over the trunk area. Excuse me. Just tapping over that center area for more, pardon me, it's dusty in here, more fullness. I'm going to show you another one up close. All right. Watch closely. Every tree needs a friend, right? Well, this one's going to be right next to him, but he's going to be smaller. So tap, tap, tap. Pardon me, I walk to the back of the room in the front, and we're right next to the highway. And when there's dust in here, sometimes it gives me a tickle. And right now I have a tickle. So I'm going to show you this tree, then I'm going to go get some water. All right. So I'm tapping on these clumps and I'm dropping down with each successive branch. And notice how each branch isn't exactly the same. Each one has its own little personality. Also notice that I can still see the sunset and the mountain between the branches. I want to make sure that the birds can still fly between those branches. Don't make them too close together. We do not want any angry birds in our painting. No angry birds. All right. The branches aren't perfect. And then remember, over the middle part of it, more fullness by just tapping on a little bit more over the middle, especially near the bottom. Okay. And I can, if you want to unmute, if you have a question about that, I can do them again, or I don't know, I don't want to be too boring. There are 6 pine trees across the bottom of this painting. 2 tall ones on each side, and then somewhere in here, 2 mediums, and then somewhere in here, 2 smalls. But notice how they're not spread out perfectly. That's more natural. They don't look like fence posts at Disney World, right? Spread out. This area, since this mountain is really kind of the highlighted mountain, I don't want to cover that up with too many trees. So I might put another one, you know, somewhere else so that that one can be on its own and really shine. Maybe I'll put one here. Always leave a point at the top. Always leave a point. If you don't leave a point, your eye won't immediately say pine tree. It might say bush. And it's fine if you paint a bush instead of a pine tree. That's fine. It's just this painting has pine trees. So always have a sharp point at the top and then fill in any fullness as you go down. Come back and fill in any fullness that it was lacking. You don't want to see the trunk as a line. Maybe I'm going to have a big one right here. You decide where they go based on looking at your mountains and whatever you feel like. But always have that point, leave space between the branches, keep my brush flat. And take your time with it. This is the last step. We're just going to sign our name. So right now I can still see the trunk through as I'm coming down and tapping all the branches. But then after I get them all on, then I'll come through and add some more fullness in between. And I'm also bringing them down all the way to the bottom because these are the tops of trees, more likely. And so you're not going to see a stump at the bottom. Plus, here's the thing, when you're painting pine trees and like it's a natural landscape, the grass grows up to the bottom branch on a pine tree. So you almost, in the wild, you almost never see a stump at the bottom. You see the stumps in a city park because somebody's removed the bottom branches to mow under it. Or you see it on a Christmas tree because someone's removed the bottom branches to cut the tree down. But if you go up to Estes Park or somewhere up in the mountains, if you really pay attention the next time, you'll see that the grass grows right up to the bottom branch. At least that's my experience. Feel free to unmute if you have any questions. I'd be happy to walk through that again if you need it. And once again, I'm using my medium flat brush and black paint, just plain old black paint, because these are silhouettes. The light is on the other side of the tree. So on our side, we just see black. What I see most often in the studio when people are doing these pine trees, I frequently see they'll put the branches too close together and then it's just a black triangle. If you do that, don't be shy, don't worry, be honest, just tell me and I can help you later by showing you a trick to break those up a bit. But try to keep space between so you can still see little sunlight back there or moonlight. Whatever that is, sunlight and moonlight. And leave a space for the birds. So I'm tapping back on to create that extra fullness around the center, especially at the bottom. At 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees. I'm going to do another one and I want to make sure I don't make them equidistant. means perfectly measured apart. Some are tall, some are short, some are medium. Each little tree, like every member of your family, has a different personality. Ta-da. And then I'm going to let those dry a few minutes before I put my initials. And with my initials, I'll just use a tiny brush, little white paint, and I'll just put it on a dry spot somewhere in a corner. Okay, just so because someone asked about glitter. Again, we don't put this in the kit. It's very optional, but I thought I'd mention it in case you happen to live near a dollar store and you want to go look. This liquid glitter that I did notice at the dollar store, actually, which really surprised me because a gallon of it wholesale cost me $78. And so retail, it's like 110 or something. Anyway, so it goes on looking like glue. It goes on white, but then it has glitter kind of cooked into it, like mixed into this. It's like white Elmer's glue with glitter in it. That's basically what it is, a little thinner than that. And so it goes on looking white. And in the studio, when people put it on, they always panic. Oh no, I just covered my painting in white. And then it dries. And then when it dries, it just sparkles. That's all it does. And so, like I said, I was really surprised. I saw a little bottle of this at Michael's in the craft, in a dollar store in a craft section. They definitely have it at Michael's too, but in little bottles, like 3-ounce bottles. I get mine in a gallon jug for the studio. But anyway, so it goes on looking like really thin glue with glitter in it, and then it dries and just becomes sparkles. That's kind of fun. And so I only put it on over dry paint. I never put on anything wet. And I'm going to show you, it is on this original, and you can only see the sparkles when I move it around in the light. See the sparkles?
That looks beautiful.
That's so pretty.
It's beautiful.
And if you do use it, make sure your brush is clean and dry, and you only put it on over dry paint. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Oh my gosh, those are fantastic. Yay. Okay, you guys, this was a really hard painting, and you nailed it. You should be so proud of yourselves.
Thank you.
It's all because of you, Nancy. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks.
You inspire us.
Yay, I love that. Thank you.